Hi, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Stephen and Oliver Show. This week is a very serious one. We think it's important, and I think also important, before I introduce the title, to highlight that we don't claim to be experts in this field. But as this episode goes out, it's a couple of days after what is called Blue Monday. And that is deemed to be, not necessarily proven to be, but deemed to be one of the most depressing days of the year. It's the third Monday of the year. This year it fell on the 20th of January, if I've got my research right. So we thought this episode might be useful for some people as individuals themselves or for people they know. It's called Suicidal Thoughts. So I say, I'm sorry it's a bit of a downer, but I just feel that at a time like this, we've agreed this would not be a bad idea to start sharing some information about the things to look out for in people, some of the organisations out there and so forth as well to point people to. So really stressing that whilst we help people a lot, this isn't a specialism of ours, so we're not claiming to be true professionals in this field, but we have a lot of conversations with people. We know about how to engage with them. So therefore, we think it's appropriate that we at least give it a go and put some help out there. So, Stephen, when I talk about suicidal thoughts, obviously difficult one to cover, but that's our skill set, difficult conversations. What immediately comes to mind for you?
You know, it's one of those, when you just said it then, my heart kind of like just missed a beat and it just went dumb. And I just started to really think about people that I've mentored, in the past, but also in the last 6 months, that I've admitted to having suicidal thoughts and talked about those low periods in their life. Again, I'm no expert, and I don't have a doctorate in this, but one of the things that always comes back is if an individual is able to really talk about how they're feeling inside, deep inside, it does help. You know, what I feel is sometimes is people get to a point where they don't believe they're needed in the world. They don't believe that the people around them need them. And when you get to that point of isolation in your head, then obviously it's very, very dangerous. And I guess, you know, it's one of those things, isn't it, where the more you talk about something and the more you're able to talk about it, then the better you can feel as an individual. The word that I thought about when you started talking was the word isolation. And I guess people feel isolated and feel alone and feel on their own in their head. And that feeling can happen even when you're surrounded by lots of people, because it's not about people being around you. It's about the conversations that you're having with the people around you. It's about how deep you go. You've often heard me talk about, you know, the famous question that you ask someone, how are you? And they say, I'm okay. And then you say it twice, how are you? And then they say, okay. And then you go, no, how are you? And then they go, well. And it's that kind of, you know, there's some of the signals you can pick up on when someone's just very quickly saying, I'm okay. And you go a bit deeper. And when you start to go a bit deeper, that opens a conversation, that opens a connection, that opens that line of communication where that person feels comfortable with talking about it. The other thing that comes to mind when you said what you said was the feeling of being confined in a space. So I often talk about this when I'm mentoring, that, you know, sometimes the space that we're in is not conducive to good mental health. So what I say is is go outside, take yourself away from that space, take yourself away from that environment, and that can really help. You know, also, you know, who we surround ourselves with. You know, I've felt this so many times where certain people just drain me of my energy, and because they drain me of my energy, my mind is probably not where it needs to be, and I don't feel as positive because of being around those type of people. So again, I'm not saying that people make you have suicidal thoughts. What I'm saying is, if you're not around the right people, your mind can go to a scary, blank, horrible place. We also know, people suffer with trauma, whether that's in adulthood or whether that's in childhood, and that trauma is never really dealt with, and it comes back, and it, because it's always there. It's not that it's coming back; it's always there because it hasn't been dealt with. It lays dormant in us, and then we could be doing something where that comes out. And I guess I thought about that as well. So I thought about trauma, and we've all suffered trauma in some shape or form. And what we're talking about here, and it's really important. I really want to get this across to people that are listening. When we talk about suicidal thoughts, people sometimes draw a picture of what that must mean. That person must be really low, or that person must be really, really down, and they must look a certain way. And what I'm saying, it's not about visual. It really isn't about visual. I've often said, I've been in a relationship where I've seen that person every day, but I felt alone. I've been in a relationship where I haven't seen that person every day and I've not felt alone. And it's how we feel inside of our heads, and it's really important to get that across to people that the signals that we think we might see when someone's feeling this way is not necessarily true. Norwich City did an absolute blinding
that's great
advert last year about this, and everyone that watched that advert thought the person that was silent and quiet and didn't have much to say for themselves was the person with the mental health issues. It wasn't. It was a person that was loud, that was boisterous, that was looking confident, and looking like they were having the best time in their life. And that's what I want to get across to people. Because someone has suicidal thoughts doesn't mean they're locked in their room on their own, and they don't talk very much and they're in a corner. It's sometimes the opposite. And this is why I think we should go deeper, talk more, ask more questions, and go deeper. So does that kind of does that answer your question?
No, absolutely. It's just always good to just capture our immediate reaction, because whilst we had this planned ahead, we hadn't really planned for it, so we just sat down a few minutes before recording with a little bit of information. And if you're watching on the video, I'm going to keep looking to my right because I have some information that I want to share, but I want to make sure I get it right. So normally it's a little bit more up here in our noggins, whereas this one I want to make sure I don't make any boo-boos. Exactly right. It's that perception that someone's okay. It's exactly that thing. If you care about somebody to any degree, to asking if they're okay and then just them say okay and so forth, they're kind of not real questions, are there? And if there's things that are maybe bothering you, that are noticing, then they're noticing changes in their behaviour. I've got some of the top ones here that have been recommended by certain websites of support, which we're going to put the contact details for in the descriptions of the podcast. But I can certainly refer to them in a little while. But the top 5 things they've talked about is changes in behaviour. So we've talked about that there. Maybe they get more hyper. Well, that's you wouldn't necessarily think that that's a thing to look out for, but actually it is. It's a noticeable change in behaviour and something that's worth exploring. And I'm going to talk a bit about how you can potentially push that. As coaches, I think we know how to channel that, but for people out who are listening, they might not. And therefore, if one of these questions that we prompt might just help you make that breakthrough with somebody, that's going to be really powerful. Obviously, if someone's expressing feelings of hopelessness, that seems a fairly obvious one to look at. And the others are giving away possessions, because there's a whole multiple reasons as to why they might do that. But if that's something that doesn't normally happen and they're doing it, and it's maybe things you're a bit surprised, that's apparently a really strong indicator. Obviously, talking specifically about death and suicide is a bit of a no-brainer, but again, not something that should go unchecked. And this is where, if you genuinely don't feel that you're the right person for this, again, some of the organisations that we'll mention, and there are more than what we'll mention, but there's 3 that we've picked up quickly. And finally, engaging in risky behaviours. Now that can be physical risky behaviours, or that can be maybe financial risky behaviours. It can be all sorts of different things from the reading that I've done, but they're all things to look out for. So first of all, I don't mean this to scare anybody. If you're noticing that in other people, though, I think a few little check-ins wouldn't go amiss. And the sorts of things that you can do, you can be a bit like Stephen said at the start, when you ask how they're okay and they say fine and say, no, really, how are you? Well, no, I'm okay. No, but really, just pushing it. If they say they're okay 3 times, then I think maybe you need to just leave it there because they're not up for engaging on it. But the other sorts of things is to ask open questions that they can't say a yes to. So, what have you been thinking about lately? I know that might seem a bit random, but what's been on your mind lately? That's a really good question because it's going to stump them, firstly. They can't just fob you off with a yay or a no or okay or something like that. They've actually got to give an answer. Even if that answer is F off, that's none of your business, that might be a bit of an indicator. And say we're in a working environment, that's just something you can maybe talk to somebody else who's more senior or in human resources or something to say that you've just got a few concerns about an individual. The other ones is to listen without judgment. So if somebody is having these conversations about like the worst part, like death or suicide and so forth, do not try and tell them not to do it. Do not tell them that that's silly or stupid or don't be such a fool or anything along those. Listen with intent and hear them, take them seriously, because you just never know where that conversation might lead. Maybe in 2, 3, 4 minutes time, they might start talking about the actual truth of the matter. Whereas if you close it off by saying, oh, don't talk like that, don't put yourself down, or don't be so negative or something like that, you run the risk of them thinking, oh, well, I'm not going to talk to them. But the more you let them talk, it's one of the, I know this is a bit random, but it's one of the key things that come out of hostage negotiations, isn't it? When you listen to the FBI guys, they just want people to talk. Sure. And the more relaxed, the more they talk, the more they slip up, the more things that information comes out. And with these people, you kind of want them to slip up. You want them to tell you what's on their mind, where they're going wrong. So whilst slip up sounds mean, actually it's what you want them to do. You want them to trip over themselves a little bit. And the other thing is to offer hope. And there's 3 bullet points I took down, which I really liked here. So I am literally reading them from the paper. And the first one is to remind them that there are always alternatives and this pain is temporary. So somebody might be raw from something, talk to trauma. It could be very fresh trauma, or it could be an anniversary of a trauma or something like that. So just reminding them that, pain does dull, things do improve. Note that they've overcome difficulties before. So if you've seen them in this scenario before, perhaps, and they've achieved it before and they've overcome it before, remind them that they've been here before and that they can come through it. And finally, help them identify reasons for living, which I know seems quite deep and that might not feel comfortable for everybody, but that is a really important thing. So if they've got kids, things like that, pull at their heartstrings a little bit. This is the sort of thing that I'm not advising, that Stephen's not advising. This is stuff that we've researched, and organisations such as Mind, the Calm Zone, and SOS Silence, Silence of Suicide, which is SOS, funnily enough, very similar to our podcast. Oops. Then they are 3 organisations that have a lot of information. And so we'll put the links in all of the descriptions for the podcasts, and you can definitely go there and take a look. So they're the sort of key meaty bits. We don't want to sort of dwell too long on this one because it is a bit morbid, but at the same time, we want to put it out there. So for me, I kind of given the technical stuff, a little bit of the information. Stephen's given some of the more thought-provoking information out there. Any sort of final pieces that you'd like to put out to people listening in any particular position they might find themselves in?
I mean, for me, if this has triggered anyone out there that's listening, there is hope. And through conversation, through sharing, you can start to deal with those thoughts that you have in your head. And, I would go as far to say many of us have those thoughts, and we might not even acknowledge it at that time that we're having those thoughts. And I think it's so important that this is not a conversation that's taboo, because that's one of the issues, is people feel like they can't talk about it because of what that then means for them. What do they look like? And I just want to just encourage anyone that's really touched by this and they want to reach out to us first and have that conversation, and we can give you the opportunity to know where to go to for more help and support. We're not experts in this, but again, many people that work for the Samaritans don't start off as experts, but what they all have in common is they will listen.
Yeah.
And what they all have in common is they will have a list of organizations that they can refer you to. So as much as I'm saying we're not experts, I want to taper that with saying anyone that's prepared to listen to someone, that is sometimes the starting point. It's not about giving advice. It's not about telling someone don't do this or don't do that. It's about listening.
Yeah.
And there's something that I talk about quite a lot. I think we hear a lot, but we don't listen.
Yeah.
I think when you listen, it's just so much deeper. And I've talked about the onion layer before, that we've got to be prepared to strip back those layers and go deeper.
Yeah.
And it's only by going deeper that you can have those real meaningful conversations where you can really start to unearth things and you can really start to support someone, because by talking about it, how they're really feeling inside, they can start to acknowledge that and then make the steps that they need. Without doing that, it's almost impossible because it stays locked inside. And, two things happen from that. You either explode outwards or you implode. You do one or the other. So I do think, this art of discussion and communication and talk. And, listen, me and Oliver have been in dark places in our lifetime. And we can both categorically say on this podcast that we know that through talking about how we felt has absolutely helped us. Us doing this podcast, me and Oliver, it's almost like therapy for us. We get together, we're able to talk about things. We talk for hours about various things, and actually it helps us as individuals. So we know that this works. We're not sat here trying to get likes or get votes or get, whatever it is. We truly believe in what we're saying, and we know the art of conversation, the art of going deeper, the art of being able to listen can help someone. So a bit long-winded there, but it's a real tough one for me actually, because I've been close to a number of people that have taken their life in my lifetime. And one of the things that often comes back is people say, oh yeah, they're selfish. Look at what they've left behind. And I've tried to explain to people that in that moment, those people were not thinking about anyone else. They were just thinking that they're alone and they don't want to be here because they're not beneficial to anyone. That's where their mind has gone. And this is why, this is a topic that we should, we know 100% that, men need to talk about this. I know 100% that black men of a certain age need to talk about this. I know that for a fact. I can absolutely, signpost anyone, any man of color that's struggling because their environment is so enclosed and they don't have that outlet. Reach out to me and I will help you. We know in men in general, regardless of color or creed, this is a strong subject because they do not communicate, because they do not open up, because they do not share. So that's it from me. So a tough one today, but I really implore you, if, don't rule out the people around you and the power that they have by conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've deliberately timed it at this particular week because it whether you want to believe it specifically or not, it is always a challenging time, this sort of early part of January. It can be financial pressures, it can be family fallouts that just happened, it can be lack of sunlight. I mean, it doesn't matter what the motivators are. I can come up with a list of reasons why, but it's a real thing. Whether it's a specific day, I don't want to need to have the argument. I think it's just healthy to have the conversation. Remind people listening that there are definitely people out there who do care, are interested in helping that. If you're believing there is no one cares and no one there to help you, you might feel right about the people close to you. But the fact that there are people out there, professionals, volunteers, people like ourselves who are willing to just listen, proves that there are people who do care. Whether they are the ones you want them to be, that's a different debate, but it doesn't mean no one cares and no one's going to help. So please do reach out. Like I say, we'll put some of the information in the descriptions of the podcasts on for each episode. But in the main, reach out to either one of us if you don't feel there's anywhere else you can go, because we will definitely listen, hear you, and do what we can to help. So I hope that has been useful to anybody affected by that. And of course, as I've just said, I'll repeat again, reach out if you want to speak to us. Okay. Stay well, people, and we'll see you on the next one.